What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JAR. JAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And we are still here reviewing Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch stories in honor of our most recent trip to Zendikar in Zendikar Rising, although we will likely be taking a break from that to go to Kaldheim soon, but we don't know exactly that yet. We'll talk about that more later. Also, Happy New Year, this being the first JAR of 2021, although the last one was on New Year's Eve, so we still wish you a Happy New Year then as well. But new year, new set.
Yes.
For JAR. We're happy with it. We hope you all are as well, and we would love feedback from you in the comments below. As with really anything that we talk about today or in any episode. But this week, our story that we're reviewing is Memories of Blood by Ken Troop. My quick review at the top is, well, actually, you know what, Amy, you are particularly connected with this type of story, so why don't you give your quick review first? Okay, a tougher one, that's fair.
Awesome.
Okay, good. Good.
Is that quick enough?
Quicker! Come on! Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very good story, and I think it's a cool introduction for this set, at least. Cool introduction to Drana and a lot of other things. We can talk more about it, but you should go read it, is basically what we're saying. The link, if you are unfamiliar, this is an older story, so instead of having to slog through and find it, trust me, we have to do it enough when we make these videos, so we'll do it for you. How's that sound?
Yes.
If you check in the description down below, the top link will be a link to go read this story for yourself if you are interested in doing so, and then of course, we would love it if you would come back here and join us in our review so that you can give your feedback as well as hear ours. Because we're going to summarize it slightly since it's an older story, but we're not going to be exhaustive because we encourage you to go read it for yourselves. So, speaking of which, on to the full review itself. This story, as I alluded to, references Drana. What are your thoughts on Drana? I mean, I know you like her, and I think most people who've watched us for a while have at least heard you mention that you like her. Is there a particular reason why? Is there something about her that, like, whether it's this story or others that drew you to her for why you like her?
Well, I think the first instance where I actually met her was when she drank the Eldrazi's blood.
Same, absolutely, in this story,
and that's fucking badass. So,
okay.
I don't know if it was this story. It doesn't seem like it was exactly this story, was it?
It definitely was, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It had a different...
Where she drank the sire, yeah.
I don't know. It felt like it had a different mood hearing it this time around. So maybe it's just that I'm different now because that was so long ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it was just I don't know. We can get into it.
Sure. So
after the quick review part.
Well, we're done with the quick. I said on to the full review itself.
Well, what did you say about it?
The quick review?
Yeah.
I said it was good, and I encouraged people to read it. And I said it was an introduction. Okay.
Anyway.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so...
Sorry.
It's fine. So we're getting to meet Drana here, and this was our first introduction to Drana, although it may not have been yours if she was around for the original Zendikar block, Zendikar Worldwake Rise of the Eldrazi stories. We were not as present in reading those as we were for these.
Right.
The other, like, recurring character that we heard of in this story, besides Ulamog, was Gideon, because Drana kept hearing about Gideon from Inkindi and his warriors who had come from Seagate. So, kind of teasing Drana and Gideon meeting. We know that means that Drana will also be meeting Jace and others like Tazri, who later will be General Tazri, but for now is just Tazri. So that is interesting. But basically this story is Drana leading vampires and mortals, survivors, refugees, if you will, out of Guldraz, or should I say, away from the center of Guldraz. They're being chased by Eldrazi, one large sire and then a bunch of little scions.
Yeah.
And Drana was kind of referencing, like, getting to the coast and then having to, like, turn around, but, like, some of the others wanted to go across the water to Tazim, but Drana didn't believe that there was anything better on the other side because Drana seemed very prideful in that regard, where she said, well, you know, we're the vampires. We're the most powerful race on Zendikar, so if we're having trouble with the Eldrazi, why would going anywhere else be any better for us in that regard?
Well, I don't know how prideful that is, maybe, but, you know, I think there's some validity to it. I mean, she's seen the destruction that is around. Just because Tazim is over there doesn't mean it's any better over there.
Right.
You know, and now that she, in that moment, already kind of knew that the Eldrazi were, like, otherworldly.
Yes.
She knew that they weren't just born of Zendikar, you know?
Yeah.
She has no reason to believe that Tazim doesn't have just as many of them
Sure.
as this area
Well,
does.
I mean, she talked about the plan to go to, like, some people having the plan to go to Tazim before she drank the Eldrazi and learned that they were otherworldly, technically.
Yeah, but
because she didn't find out about their origins
right.
until she drank it. But
well, their exact origins maybe, but
sure.
so maybe she, up until that point, thought that they were from Zendikar.
Right.
I wouldn't think that she would think that, but maybe she did.
Well, she would have had to, because otherwise it wouldn't have been such a big reveal to find out that they weren't.
Well, I don't think that finding out that they wasn't. I don't think that that's what the big deal was. The big deal was, like, getting a glimpse of the blind eternities almost.
Well, she didn't see it. She just learned that they were from there, right? There was that...
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right, but so like any other plane-locked being, she didn't know that there were other worlds.
Right.
She then, once she found out about them, assumed that Gideon was likely from one of those other worlds, and that was after drinking it towards the end. So, you know, that's kind of what spurs her to want to go to Seagate.
Okay,
But,
so I guess she had to have thought that they were terrestrial versus extraterrestrial.
right, because they had she has no concept of what extraterrestrial is, or that it's even possible to be from another area. So the whole story is basically about Drana being the leader of this big group, and how she's going to go about saving her people from all these Eldrazi behind her that she knows she and the people that are with her are not equipped to handle.
Right.
Because they have some warriors, some folks who are able to fight, but the majority of the people with her are sick, infirm, etc. And in fact, she has already had to make the tough decision that when it's time, there are like these big sleds that are like pushing all the mortals, as they keep calling them, compared to the vampires. And that whenever it's time to feed, I don't know, that like eat, the sleds stop and everybody who can gets off the sleds. And everybody who can't knows that they're going to be eaten by the vampires.
Yeah.
And that's just how Drana made a compromise of, okay, all you people, you can come with us, but they're going to eat you. And we're going to, but only when you get sick. Right. If you're about to die anyway, you're going to feed my people who are keeping you all safe. It's like a very weird mafia scenario of like protection. You know, we'll give you protection, but then we're going to eat you when you start dying.
Right.
To a degree, it makes sense.
And to them, it made sense because their other option was you die now.
Sure.
You know, so they were like, well, you know, we can keep clinging to life here, and then the day that we stop being able to cling to life, we die.
Yeah.
we die by feeding others who are helping others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's much more noble than feeding the Eldrazi.
Yeah. And then
And much more productive for the cause of saving Zendikar.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, she kind of referenced that, like, it's a kind of a tenuous thing that, like, nobody really talks about, like, on purpose, because it's not great, but everybody understands that it's kind of the best option they have.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, just letting the vampires eat whoever they want is not great. So you have to let them have the sick and dying. But also that goes to, I mean, Drana mentioned that she hadn't had a good meal in a long time.
Yeah.
Right? And that when the warriors show up, who we'll talk about in a second, that they screamed health to her, and she wanted them but restrained herself as best she could until later on, which we'll also talk about. And so, because this is a story, something needs to happen. And so as they are getting to, they being this group led by Drana, as they're getting to the coast, where they could go to Tazim on the other side, as they're getting to that area, they come to realize that there's shapes off in the distance. And it, like, Drana said it was like a dot that turned into 2 dots, that turned into 5 dots, 10 dots, and it turned out it was like 100 kite sails. Core kite sails.
Yeah.
Which is impressive that it was 100 of them. That's really cool. And she references that because they're Gideon's men, who Gideon sent to try to find survivors to bring back to Seagate to help that be their final stand against the Eldrazi, so they can get all of the people, all the warriors, all the fighters possible back to this point, or that point, to fight to save this plane against Ulamog, who Gideon doesn't yet know is coming, but that'll help to amass more people, or be worse to amass more people there.
Yeah, well, I mean, he knows he's coming. He just doesn't know how soon.
Okay. I didn't get that as much.
I mean, they all know he's coming. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I guess.
There's just this understanding among everyone who lives on Zendikar at this point, who is still alive, that, you know, there's an inevitability of the Eldrazi showing up.
Sure.
The actual Eldrazi showing up.
The Eldrazi Titan.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And so these kite sails show up, and they say, you should come with us, you have fighters here, let's go over to Seagate. And Drana basically says, we've got people here to protect.
Yeah.
And then we get to the weird part of the story, where she's like, we have kids here to protect. And Inkindi, I couldn't remember his name, Inkindi references, he's the leader of the core kite sails that show up. And he references the kids and says, you know, you've got kids here. And Drana says, yeah, but, you know, they're not children, they're not innocents, they're fighters. And this is something that has been seen in a lot of, like, survival horror type scenarios. Children are going to get caught in the crossfire. We all consider children to be innocents, right? That's what they are. And, you know, you hear the typical phrase of, like, women and children need to be protected, that kind of thing. And the women part is either misogynistic or chivalrous, and it depends on who you ask, I feel like.
Either way, it's pointless.
But children are innocent. They're not meant to gather up arms and fight, right? That's not what people expect of children. Children are supposed to be protected by the adults around them, one way or another. If that's in a fighting scenario, then by fighting, or, you know, by hiding or whatever. But children are not typically thought of as fighters. And when they are, it's kind of universally understood, at least here on Earth, right? It's kind of universally understood that that means you're desperate. When you're asking children to fight, it's not for fun, right? It's not like
You're desperate, or you're just that evil. That
Sure.
you
Or you're a monster.
manipulate children into fighting for you.
Absolutely.
You know,
and that
kind of thing.
and that does happen here as well, unfortunately.
Right.
So absolutely fair. And so in reference to that, Inkindi gets upset because Drana references one of the kids, Melindra. And Melindra comes up and is like, yeah, we're the Orphans Brigade. And she pulls out her weapon. And Inkindi's like, are you insane? To Drana, not to
Right.
Melindra. She's like, are you insane? That's a child. Why are you sending her out to fight? And Drana, I think somewhat sensibly, this is me personally, said, listen, everybody, and maybe she said this part to herself, but everybody at this point on Zendikar has seen battle if they're still alive.
Right.
Because the Eldrazi don't care if you're a child or an adult or an older, infirm person or whatever. They're eating the rocks, for God's sake. So
Yeah.
they definitely don't care what type of a grown humanoid you are. If you're a child, you're getting eaten just as much as if you're a full-bodied adult warrior.
Right.
And they're not... The Eldrazi don't have strategy where they're going to go for the warriors first and leave the kids for last.
Right.
It's just, if you're in front of it, that's what they're going
Yeah,
for.
they're not thinking, oh, you're more of a danger to me, so I'm going to eat you first.
Correct.
They're not thinking. They're just consuming.
Correct. And we get a bit of that when Drana drinks the sire, but we'll get there. But that connection that Inkindi has, or that frustration that Inkindi has with Drana's attitude toward children and the Orphans Brigade is what eventually will lead to his death. And Drana knows that and calls that out in her own mind to say he cares about those kids. That's something good to know. So that she says, we can use the flyers. So what Drana basically says to Inkindi, I'll come with you to fight with this Gideon guy. But first, you and your 99 other folks that you brought with you will fight with me. Here.
Yeah.
To fight the Eldrazi that are coming after us, and we will kill them, and then I'll come with you to Seagate. And sure enough, the fight ensues, and it goes very poorly. Because again, it's like one big sire, some flyers, and a lot of scions, and the flyers are being taken out, the little guys are being taken out, but it's kind of overwhelming, because there's tens of thousands, she said, right, of the Eldrazi in just that
She
one
said
cluster.
So much more than thousands
Right.
that it was stupid to try and count them.
Mm-hmm.
Or stupid to try and quantify them.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the fight ensues, the fight is going poorly, but Inkindi and his men are up in the air. And Drana is also up in the air. And at one point she calls down or sends one of her advisor down to tell the Orphans Brigade to charge the Eldrazi sire.
Yeah.
The massive, giant beast. And Inkindi, as we referenced, gets very upset.
Yeah.
And Drana is thinking to herself, good, get upset. Come on. And so sure enough, he gets upset. He like curses her out, basically. Not really, but like, you know,
Kind of.
a pox upon your house kind of a thing, right? And dives down with his men to take on this Eldrazi sire. And it's so interesting to me what happens here, because Inkindi is the leader. So you would think, go men, and they all dive down and Inkindi dives down after them. Or even he is at the front of the line, but he is the best of them because he's the leader. So he'd be able to like dodge out of the way and stuff. No. The second they all get down there, Inkindi gets grabbed and his head pops off. And by pops off, I mean the Eldrazi squeezes his head until it's gone and his headless body falls to the ground. So good.
Yeah.
And then all of them start dying. One by one by one. And so Drana grabs one of the men as his body is falling. He's still alive, but he's unconscious, being swatted out of the air or whatever.
Yeah.
And she drinks him. She bites his neck, drinks him, says she loves it, it's the best she's had in a while. And the line is, which we both wrote down because it is a hell of a thing. She drained him utterly, letting his desiccated flap of skin waft gently to the ground.
Just, woo.
Like a leaf on the wind kind of a thing. So good.
Yeah.
So brutal.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe this is why you like Drana so much.
Yeah.
She's great. This was very good. Very, very brutal. And so then, noticing this and feeling more empowered at that point, she flies down and drinks from the Eldrazi sire. She punches her way into its chest cavity or whatever and drinks from it, and drinks from it, and drinks from it. And this moment is the moment that I appreciate the most from this story and from other stories that Ken Troop has written and has written here in 2021, but in terms of this story, he has not yet written. This is one of the first. It's the first of my recollection, but if you have others that are examples of this, please let us know in the comments because I really want to read them. But Ken Troop does a really good job of putting people in very existential, out-of-body experience type scenarios, especially ones that are in no way relatable to us here on Earth.
You're right.
Right? Drana is thousands of years old. She mentions it a couple of times in this story.
And she's a vampire.
Correct. And yet, when she drinks of this Eldrazi, it begins corrupting her in some way, but not to a point that she's even really aware of. Mm-hmm. She's kind of thinking like, you must consume, you must destroy, you must... all these things. And she is thinking as if she is an Eldrazi.
Right.
Right, and then she is regaining her memories because she mentions that at one point in her life, she had a choice. She was either going to spend her whole life stacking pebbles on top of one another, which are memories, and that was going to be her focus. Okay, I'm hundreds of years old at this point.
Yeah.
Right now she's thousands, but at the time, I'm hundreds of years old, and now it's going to be my job to remember every aspect of my life,
right,
of my centuries alive on this plane. And to do so, I need to spend a large portion of my time remembering these moments and properly stacking them up one by one by one on top of each other and making...
kind of reviewing them.
Yes, and making sure, making sure that they're staying steady.
Right.
And inspecting each one closely in that regard.
Yeah, trying to ensure that she's not forgetting them.
Right. And in doing so, she decided that was not her path.
Right.
And so instead she was going to live her life, not focus on that, and because of that she's forgotten many things. And so drinking of this Eldrazi, she remembers things. She remembers first becoming separated from Ulamog. Mm-hmm. Because the vampires on Zendikar are born from Ulamog's sire, I guess, whatever, like born from Ulamog. And she is remembering back to that moment, back to when she went from I am Ulamog, and so is everything else, to that's Ulamog, I am Drana.
Right.
And she remembers that back to that moment as part of her power surging into her from drinking this sire down, and then uses that power, first of all, to force her way free of the sire's corruption.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to basically make her into an Eldrazi. Tentacles burst forth from her back and all this other stuff. And she fights back. And she says, no, I am ruled by nobody, or I follow no one. And explodes the sire from all around her.
Yeah, and like recreates herself.
Yes.
Inside it.
Which is so cool.
Yeah.
And then, kind of, for those of you that understand Dragon Ball Z, in a reverse spirit bomb kind of a moment, instead of multiple people giving her their energy, she gives her energy to all of her people because they're all going to die. Yeah. They're all losing, they're all dying, and so she gives of her energy to them, gives them a surge of power. They all what am I trying to say here? They all become stronger and semi-invulnerable
Yeah.
and have a renewed vigor to themselves, which allows them to fight and kill all of the remaining Eldrazi, because even with the Sire dead, they were still losing. So that's kind of what made Drana realize, let me release this power, heal their wounds, bring them back, make them invulnerable, and there you go.
Yeah.
And she did, they won.
Which just proves that she was right all along.
How so?
And that everybody else sucks.
I mean, sure, I guess. Without her, you know? And sure enough, she finds out in the end that Inkindi and all of his men are dead. And she's like, well, it was worth it. Melindra lived.
Yeah.
And in fact, Melindra was what made Drana decide to use that ability to save everybody. Because she looked and she was like, I am no one's or something. You know, I belong to no one. And then when she noticed Melindra was about to die, because a tentacle was coming up to Melindra while she's like stabbing at this one Eldrazi, and Melindra doesn't realize it, and so Drana's saying, I belong to no one, I belong to no one, I belong to no one. And then when she sees that Melindra is about to die, she says, but they all,
mine.
yeah, but they all belong to me. And so she then releases that energy. Melindra is able to survive because the tentacle hits her and disintegrates in the process, which is fantastic. And they all win, except for Inkindi and his men, because they're all dead.
Well, I mean, so she's a really good leader. You know,
And a really good strategist as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she used Inkindi, you know, to her advantage and used him up.
Oh, yeah.
Used his army up.
Like that one guy, letting his desiccated flap of skin.
Yeah. You know, but she cares about her people that she's leading. And that's why she wanted help from this extra army in the first place. Like, no, we're not going to help you. You're going to help us. You came here to find us. You're going to help us. And then we'll go help you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when it's difficult to convince them to do that, then you just say, well, I'll stick a kid out there in the line of fire so that you feel inclined to go protect those children and get your own asses kicked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then
the children will live.
Right. Well, and now she can go back to Seagate,
Right.
meet up with this Gideon that she's heard so much about,
and understands better now that she's had the blood of, the sire.
Right, and I was going to say, that's the reason why, it seems like that's what convinces her to go even more, because even though Inkindi and his men are dead, it's probably still her best bet, to be honest. That's first. But secondly, she says, you know, this Gideon who wears strange clothes and nobody's ever heard of before now, he's probably from this other place.
Right.
And so either she can work with Gideon to send the Eldrazi to this other place, this away area, or she can find a way for her and her people to go to this other place,
Right. and
the Eldrazi can stay here and have their way with Zendikar. And again, it's a tough call to make, but sometimes the best, especially in wartime, right? Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who can make those tough calls. Right? Where can you sacrifice resources to get the best effect out of it? And there are other leaders who are unwilling to make those decisions, and sometimes you need them too. So it kind of depends, right? But in this case, you're right. That's what makes Drana a good leader here, is that she
and
knows.
I think a lot of people would read this and think that she's selfish, or think that she doesn't really care. And I think that's just wrong. I think that's just missing the intent behind her actions a little bit. And and they really don't talk about it. They really don't say, like, these were her actual intentions behind these actions that seem from the outside to be the wrong choice.
Right.
You know, but they weren't the wrong choice because she was strategizing. She was thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead of where everyone else was thinking.
Yeah, and a good leader is able to use their fighters or their employees, right, depending on how you want to look at what you mean by a leader, but they're able to use their strengths to benefit the whole group. And in Drana's case, she did that, but she also used Nkindi's weakness to benefit the whole group. He showed that it was a sore spot showing him children in trouble, and so she used that. She used that to her advantage to distract the Eldrazi sire just enough for her to go in and deal that finishing blow over time, but it cost 100 plus lives in the process.
Right.
Well,
but I mean, she made a good point. I mean, we talked about it earlier. She's sitting there going, we the vampires are the most powerful people on Zendikar. If we can't do this, nobody can.
Right.
You know, and yes, there's a big army of core coming and they can fly, but they can't drink the blood of this Eldrazi.
well, and technically the vampires can't either. Like, that's not a viable plan for them to do that a lot in the future.
Right.
It's just
and
that...
she talks about that.
Right. It's just that the good thing about the vampires is they can subsist on less. You don't have to worry about... you don't have to worry about the food, the meat that the vampires have to eat rotting, because as the other people die, the vampires have things to eat. So they can survive longer, be stronger longer, etc.
Well, and they're immortal, essentially.
As long as they have blood.
Right.
But if all the people die...
Yeah, then they're kind of screwed.
Right, so they have to get rid of the Eldrazi. It's still in their best interest, despite the fact that they could just, you know... I mean,
They
also...
can drink blood of animals and stuff if some of the animals have survived and the people haven't, or something
Sure,
like that.
but I mean, the whole point is the Eldrazi are going after everything.
Right, if everything's turned to chalk.
Right. And the Eldrazi can corrupt or can disintegrate the vampires as well. It's not like, because they're all from Ulamog, there's like, you know, a professional courtesy there. There's not.
No.
So, yeah.
Yeah, a professional courtesy and or just, you know, a familial bond.
Right. So,
no.
So the day that this video comes out is the day that there is the live stream talking all about Kaldheim. I assume, because it's what we've had in the past, but I can't know because I'm filming this prior to the day it comes out, because otherwise you wouldn't be watching it. But I assume that live stream will have information about the stories and when they're coming out. My guess, and let's see if I'm correct, but my guess is, since previously they had the side stories come out on Fridays and the mainline stories come out on Wednesdays, I assume that because the live stream is on Thursday, they're going to say, hey, the first story's tomorrow. Isn't that wacky and crazy and great? Spoilers, it's not, and really stop doing it.
It's rude.
It's super annoying. But anyway, and it's probably only annoying for content creators.
Yeah.
Probably only annoying for us. But at the same time, it's stupid. Because there's no reason to not be like, hey, by the way, 2-week notice, 3-week notice, something, anything, more than 24 hours.
Well,
here you go.
Unless they think that people are going to forget about it and stop caring. You know, like, here's this big thing we're going to put out where we talk all about it, and then 2 weeks from now is when the story actually comes out.
Well,
are you actually going to show up and read it then, or not?
Here's a tip. If you give your content creators a heads up as to when the content's coming out, they can produce content around when the story comes out so that they can let the people know. If you're afraid that they're going to forget, they can make content to let people know, as opposed to having to plan their content out weeks in advance, because everybody does, including Wizards. Don't tell me they don't, because they've been announcing this live stream for a week and a half, to 2 weeks to 3 weeks at this point. So they plan their content out weeks in advance and then don't tell their content creators when that stuff is coming out, and it's extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my little rant on it. But if that's the case, next week we will be back with Kaldheim stories. If that is not the case, and I am wrong, then we will be back next week with another Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch story, and we will do that until the Kaldheim stories come out. And then we will do the Kaldheim stories until they're done, and then back to this again. So apologies if we end up taking a break from this if you're following along and you're not interested in the Kaldheim stories for whatever reason, but we will be taking a break to do that because we want to stay as current as possible with those, and then we can come back to doing these again. We would love to hear your opinions in the comments down below.
Yes.
Also, if you are interested in our up-to-the-minute thoughts, not up-to-the-minute, but as soon as you can hear them thoughts on tomorrow's or today's live stream, it's confusing, but Thursday's live stream, right, January 7th, you can check in with us on our own stream on Friday night, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here. We stream every Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. This Friday, we will be continuing Marvel's Avengers, our playthrough of that game, and on Mondays, we play MTG Arena every single Monday. You should be here for it. It's a blast. Chat was booming this past Monday,
Yes.
so if you were there, thank you so much. And if you weren't, you missed out. So we hope that you will come and join us because it is always a ton of fun. So that is obviously going to be the end of this particular episode. I hope that we were able to cover everything that you wanted to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I love this story. I love Drana. We're both fairly certain that this was my first interaction or my first introduction to Drana,
Yeah.
and the reason why I like her as a character. So
yeah. So good times all around. I am looking forward to seeing more Ken Troop.
yes,
Because I want to talk more about his style, and hopefully you all will notice, if you haven't already, the patterns that form with his writing, because I think it goes to what you were talking about with finding which authors are best at which types of stories.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward.
They really only got better.
Yeah.
Every single one of those authors were able to really push the boundary of their own potential with the opportunities that they were given to really shine in the way that they specifically are able to shine.
Yeah.
And that's really what made the story team so incredible.
Right. And so we will have at least one more Ken Troop story in our Battle for Zendikar Oath of the Gatewatcher reviews. But I also encourage you, if you haven't already, it might take a little bit of a search for you, but you should look up our jar where we reviewed The Hand That Moves,
Yes.
which was one of Amy's favorite stories of all time. And that's also a Ken Troop story. And it's about Nissa, and it's very, very good. So
it's incredible. It's probably my all-time favorite story.
you still talk about it a lot, and that's not a
Yeah.
critique, that's just a fact. Like, it's still something you reference often of what we learned in that story.
And it's important for the canon of the characters and what has happened. I mean, it's
Nissa, Emrakul, etc.
it's imperative information as well as just being beautifully written and flawlessly executed and everything else.
Yeah.
So
Ken Troop has some good stuff. This was our first introduction to this style of writing from Ken. If there are others, please let us know because I want them all. Just
Yes.
can't get enough. But otherwise, as I said, that's going to be the end of this particular episode. We really hope that we will be back for Kaldheim whenever that happens. Whether that's next week or weeks after, but we'll be back next week either way. Whether it's for Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch, whether it's for Kaldheim, we hope that you'll be back to join us as we join you in showing off our
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
going into Kaldheim hopefully soon. Looking forward to it. Loving these stories as well. So I'm not rushing to get away from these anytime soon, I promise. It's just, when those stories come out, we'll do what we can.
It's not up to us, unfortunately.
Yes, we hope you enjoy the new set. Both Kaldheim and this, but
it's not quite finished yet, but it's close.
It's getting there. So we would love feedback from you in terms of what is your favorite thing on the set. Let us know in the comments down below. We really do appreciate it. We liked that we were able to throw some of our geek content up, but that's not just our magic stuff. Because this is Geek for All, not MTG for All yet. But yeah, thank you all so very much for watching. Please feel free to do all the fun YouTube stuff. You can like this video, share it, subscribe to this channel and our other channels, and ring the bells. All of the stuff that you will need is down in the description box below, so definitely go check it out. And for now, from us here on this Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.